At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States was a nation still defining itself. Cities were expanding upward and outward, fueled by industry, immigration, and ambition. Millions of families arrived on American shores carrying little more than hope, determination, and the belief that hard work could carve a future out of uncertainty. It was an era of factories, sweat, and sacrifice, where survival demanded resilience and success demanded discipline. In this America, greatness was rarely inherited. It was earned through endurance, repetition, and quiet suffering. This was the world into which Henry Louis Gehrig was born. On June 19, 1903, in Manhattan, New York City, Lou Gehrig entered a life that would test him long before he ever set foot on a baseball diamond. His parents, Heinrich and Christina Gehrig, were German immigrants, part of the massive wave of European families seeking stability in a rapidly industrializing America. They settled in Yorkville, a working-class neighborhood on the Upper East Side, where German was spoken as often as English, and survival depended on constant labor. Life was unforgiving. Of 4 children born to the Gehrigs, only Lou survived infancy. That reality alone cast a shadow over the household, shaping the fear, discipline, and emotional restraint that defined Lou's upbringing. Lou's father struggled to maintain steady employment. Illness, alcoholism, and epilepsy made it difficult for him to hold a job, and the responsibility of keeping the family afloat fell largely on Lou's mother. Christina Gehrig was a woman of iron will, unyielding standards, and relentless work ethic. She labored as a cook, laundress, and cleaner, often working long hours for modest pay. She believed deeply in education, order, and responsibility. To her, sports were a distraction, a dangerous indulgence that could lead her son away from stability. She envisioned a future where Lou would become an engineer, wear clean clothes, and escape the cycle of labor that defined immigrant life. Yet the streets of New York offered Lou a different education. In alleyways, vacant lots, and schoolyards, boys played stickball using broom handles and rubber balls, learning instinct, timing, and toughness without coaches or instruction manuals. It was here that Lou Gehrig developed the foundation of his athletic ability. He was not flashy, he was not loud, he was simply stronger than the others, steadier, and more durable. Even as a child, he possessed an unusual capacity to endure pain and repetition. While other boys tired, Lou persisted. While others complained, he adjusted. This quiet persistence would later become his defining trait. At Commerce High School, Gehrig's physical gifts became impossible to ignore. He excelled in multiple sports, but baseball revealed something special. His swing was compact and powerful. His hands were strong. His focus rarely wavered. In 1920, at just 17 years old, he participated in a game at Cubs Park in Chicago against older, more experienced competition. In front of more than 10,000 spectators, Gehrig launched a grand slam completely out of the stadium. The ball disappeared beyond the stands, something few professionals had ever accomplished. Word spread quickly. Newspapers took notice. Scouts paid attention. In an era when power hitters were rare, a teenage boy had just announced himself to the nation. Still, Lou Gehrig did not see himself as destined for fame. He saw himself as responsible. His loyalty to his mother and his sense of duty to provide stability remained stronger than any dream of athletic stardom. Obeying Christina's wishes, Gehrig enrolled at Columbia University to study engineering. It was a decision rooted in pragmatism, not passion. Yet even at Columbia, greatness followed him. He starred on the baseball and football teams, overpowering collegiate opponents with a calm intensity that masked his growing confidence. In 1923, Yankees scout Paul Krischel attended a Columbia game and immediately recognized what others had begun to suspect. Lou Gehrig was not just good. He was exceptional. The New York Yankees, already building a dynasty, offered him a contract. Accepting it meant abandoning his education and defying his mother's vision. Gehrig hesitated. When he finally told Christina he was leaving school, a misunderstanding softened the blow. She believed he had said Harvard instead of Hartford, where the Yankees' minor league affiliate was located. She never objected. Gehrig did not correct her. That small moment revealed the quiet complexity of Lou Gehrig. He was not a rebel. He was not a dreamer chasing glory. He was a son balancing obligation and destiny, navigating loyalty and ambition with silence rather than confrontation. When he signed with the Yankees, much of his bonus money went directly toward paying his mother's medical bills. Even as his life began to change, his priorities did not. When Lou Gehrig arrived in professional baseball, America itself was changing. The nation was emerging from World War I, and sports were becoming a powerful form of national identity. Baseball in particular stood as America's pastime, a game that symbolized order, fairness, and opportunity. Stadiums were filling, heroes were emerging, and soon, one of the most reliable figures the sport would ever know was quietly taking his place on the bench, waiting. Lou Gehrig made his major league debut with the New York Yankees in 1923. He was young, reserved, and largely unnoticed. Surrounded by louder personalities and seasoned veterans, he did not demand attention. He waited. He worked. He learned. 2 years later, opportunity arrived not with ceremony but with circumstance. On June 1, 1925, Yankees first baseman Wally Pipp was removed from the lineup due to illness. Gehrig was sent in to replace him. That substitution would change baseball history. From that day forward, Lou Gehrig did not leave the field, and as America marched deeper into the Roaring Twenties, unknowingly toward economic collapse and global conflict, a quiet man wearing number 4 began a journey defined not by spectacle, but by endurance. A journey that would come to symbolize reliability in an age of uncertainty. A journey that would earn him a name that captured the essence of his character. The Iron Horse had begun his run. When Lou Gehrig stepped into the Yankees lineup in June of 1925, there was no announcement, no expectation that history was about to begin. Baseball is a game built on routine, and at the time, player substitutions were common, unremarkable events. Yet this particular change marked the start of something unprecedented. From that afternoon forward, Gehrig became a constant in a world defined by uncertainty. He did not simply play every day. He became a symbol of dependability in an era that desperately needed it. The nickname, the Iron Horse, did not appear overnight. It emerged slowly, forged by repetition rather than spectacle. Gehrig played through pain that would have sidelined most athletes. Broken fingers, fractured toes, muscle strains, and deep bruises became part of his routine. Medical imaging later revealed that at various points in his career, Gehrig had suffered at least 17 healed fractures in his hands alone. In an age before advanced sports medicine, when treatments were primitive and expectations were harsh, durability was not just admired, it was demanded, and Gehrig delivered day after day, season after season. What made Gehrig's endurance remarkable was not bravado, but silence. He did not seek praise, he did not dramatize injury. He showed up, took his place at first base, and produced. That quiet consistency soon made him indispensable. Managers trusted him. Teammates relied on him. Fans began to associate his presence with stability. In a sport increasingly dominated by personalities and headlines, Gehrig represented something older and deeper: reliability. As his streak grew, so did his offensive production. Gehrig's swing was a study in efficiency. There was no wasted motion, no exaggerated flourish. His power came from balance, timing, and extraordinary hand strength. Pitchers learned quickly that mistakes could not be hidden from him. If the ball drifted into his zone, it rarely returned to the field of play. By the late 1920s, Lou Gehrig was no longer simply a dependable player. He was one of the most feared hitters in baseball. Yet his rise occurred in the shadow of a man who redefined fame itself. Babe Ruth arrived in New York like a force of nature. Loud, charismatic, and larger than life, Ruth embodied the excess of the Roaring Twenties. He shattered home run records, packed stadiums, and turned baseball players into national celebrities. Against such a backdrop, Lou Gehrig could have disappeared. Instead, he complemented Ruth perfectly. Batting directly behind Babe Ruth, Gehrig became the ultimate enforcer. Pitchers faced an impossible choice: walk Ruth and face Gehrig, or challenge Ruth and risk disaster. Either option carried consequences. This pairing transformed the Yankees' offense into a relentless machine. Ruth provided spectacle. Gehrig provided certainty. Together they formed the core of what many consider the greatest lineup in baseball history. Despite their contrasting personalities, the relationship between Ruth and Gehrig was built on mutual respect. Ruth admired Gehrig's strength and discipline. Gehrig respected Ruth's talent, even as he endured the constant comparison. While Ruth dominated headlines, Gehrig dominated results. He did so without resentment. When asked about playing behind Ruth, Gehrig once remarked that batting in his shadow still left plenty of room to grow. It was a characteristically modest response, one that revealed his comfort with role rather than spotlight. The 1927 season became a defining moment for both the Yankees and American sports culture. That team, later immortalized as Murderers Row, represented offensive dominance on a scale never before seen. Gehrig played a central role in that legacy. He batted .373, hit 47 home runs, and drove in 173 runs. He was named the American League Most Valuable Player, an acknowledgement that even in Ruth's era, Gehrig's contributions were undeniable. That season, and those that followed, cemented Gehrig's place among baseball's elite. From 1926 through 1938, he averaged more than 140 runs batted in per season. He drove in over 150 runs 7 times, a feat that remains extraordinary even by modern standards. His consistency was unmatched. Year after year, his performance barely fluctuated. In a sport defined by slumps and streaks, Gehrig was immune. As the nation celebrated prosperity, baseball flourished, stadiums filled with fans seeking escape and inspiration. Gehrig became part of that cultural fabric. His image appeared in newspapers across the country. Children wore his number. Yet he remained fundamentally unchanged. He lived quietly, avoided excess, and maintained a simple routine. Fame did not transform him. It barely touched him. Then, in October of 1929, the world shifted. The stock market crashed, and America plunged into the Great Depression. Jobs vanished, banks collapsed, families struggled to survive. In this climate of uncertainty and despair, sports heroes took on new meaning. They represented endurance, perseverance, and the possibility of stability. Lou Gehrig, more than most, embodied those qualities. While millions faced hardship, Gehrig continued to show up every day. His streak continued uninterrupted. In a nation desperate for reliability, he became a living metaphor. The Iron Horse did not falter. He did not complain. He simply kept going. For many fans, watching Gehrig play was a reminder that discipline and effort still mattered, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. The Yankees continued to dominate, winning championships in 1927, 1928, 1932, and again in the early 1930s. Gehrig was central to each title. In 1932, he delivered one of the most extraordinary performances in baseball history, hitting 4 home runs in a single game against the Philadelphia Athletics. He nearly hit a 5th, denied only by a remarkable catch at the outfield wall. It was a moment that showcased the full range of his power, yet he treated it with the same restraint that defined his career. Behind the numbers and accolades, Gehrig's personal life remained grounded. In 1933, he married Eleanor Twitchell, a former Chicago socialite whose strength and intelligence would later prove essential. Their relationship provided balance and support, offering Gehrig stability beyond the game. Eleanor became his closest confidant, advocate, and eventually, his voice. By the mid-1930s, Lou Gehrig had achieved everything an athlete could reasonably hope for. Records, championships, admiration, and respect followed him everywhere. His consecutive games streak continued to climb, becoming an untouchable monument to endurance. He seemed invincible, but even iron over time begins to weaken. And quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, something within Lou Gehrig began to change. For most of his career, Lou Gehrig's body had been an ally. It absorbed punishment, healed quickly, and responded faithfully to the demands placed upon it. Pain was familiar, but manageable. Fatigue came and went. Nothing lingered. That was the assumption Gehrig lived with as the 1930s progressed. He had built his identity on endurance, and endurance had never failed him. Until it did. The first signs were subtle, almost invisible to those around him. A swing that lacked its usual explosion. A ground ball that once would have been handled effortlessly slipping past his reach. A sense of heaviness in his legs, after games that previously left him energized. Gehrig noticed these changes long before anyone else did. He was a man intimately aware of his own physical rhythm. He knew when something was wrong, but he could not yet name it. At first, he did what he had always done. He worked harder. He arrived earlier, stayed later, and refined his mechanics. He adjusted his stance, altered his grip, and reviewed his swing endlessly. Decline, in his mind, was not a possibility. It was a problem to be solved. When his performance dipped slightly in 1938, many dismissed it as fatigue or age. He was in his mid-30s after all. Even legends slowed down eventually. But Gehrig felt something deeper, something unfamiliar. As months passed, the decline accelerated. Balls he once drove deep into the stands now died in the outfield. His once fearsome power seemed muted. His running became labored. During spring training in 1939, the signs could no longer be ignored. Gehrig failed to hit a single home run. He stumbled while running the bases. On several occasions, he tripped over his own feet. A strange and unsettling sight for a man known for coordination and balance. Teammates noticed. Coaches whispered. Reporters speculated. Doctors initially offered benign explanations. Gallbladder issues, digestive problems, exhaustion. These diagnoses provided temporary comfort, but no real answers. Treatments were ineffective. Rest did not restore his strength. Training did not reverse the decline. And yet Gehrig continued to play. He did not want sympathy. He did not want excuses. He wanted answers. The mental toll was immense. Lou Gehrig had never defined himself by words or emotion. He expressed identity through action, through reliability, through presence. As his body began to betray him, the foundation of his self-worth began to erode. He grew quieter, more introspective. He avoided discussing his struggles, even with those closest to him. To acknowledge weakness felt like surrender. By the start of the 1939 season, the situation had become unbearable. Gehrig's batting average plummeted. His power disappeared. Fielding became a daily challenge. Each game felt like a public reminder that something fundamental had been lost. For the first time in 14 years, the Iron Horse felt like a liability. On May 2, 1939, Lou Gehrig made the hardest decision of his life. He approached Yankees manager Joe McCarthy and told him he was taking himself out of the lineup. Not because he was injured, not because he was asked, but because, in his words, he believed he was hurting the team. It was an act of selflessness that defined his character more than any statistic ever could. That day, Gehrig sat on the bench as a spectator. The streak ended at 2,130 consecutive games. The record stood as a monument to human endurance, but its conclusion was marked not by celebration, but by silence. Fans stood in stunned respect. Teammates struggled to process what they were witnessing. Baseball had never seen anything like it. Gehrig did not announce his decision publicly. He did not seek farewell ceremonies. He simply stepped aside. To the outside world, it looked like a veteran acknowledging the inevitable decline of age. Inside, it felt like the collapse of an identity he had spent his entire life building. Soon after leaving the lineup, Gehrig and his wife Eleanor sought answers beyond the familiar confines of New York. They traveled to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, one of the few places in the world equipped to investigate neurological disorders with any degree of seriousness. The journey itself carried a sense of dread. Gehrig knew, on some level, that the truth would not be kind. After extensive testing, doctors delivered a diagnosis that was as devastating as it was unfamiliar. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, a progressive neurological disease with no cure and no meaningful treatment. The condition would slowly destroy the motor neurons responsible for muscle movement, leading to paralysis and, ultimately, death. The prognosis was measured not in decades but in years. The diagnosis was officially confirmed on June 19, 1939, Lou Gehrig's 36th birthday. In a letter to Eleanor, Gehrig tried to frame the news with characteristic restraint. He wrote that there was no cure, but that the disease was painless. He did not dwell on fear. He did not express anger. He focused on facts. Even in this moment, he was thinking of how to spare others from his own suffering. Word of his condition spread quickly. The baseball world was stunned. Fans who had grown up watching Gehrig play every day struggled to reconcile the image of invincibility with the reality of mortal fragility. The Iron Horse, who had never missed a game, was now facing an opponent he could not outlast. As the news reached Yankee Stadium, plans were made to honor Gehrig while he was still able to stand before the crowd. The date chosen was July 4, 1939, Independence Day, a symbolic moment for a nation built on perseverance and resilience. It would become one of the most emotional days in the history of American sports. And on that day, Lou Gehrig would find the words he had never needed before. On July 4, 1939, Yankee Stadium was filled not with the usual noise of competition, but with something heavier, more solemn. More than 60,000 people packed the stands, many unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would transcend sports entirely. The game scheduled that day mattered little. What mattered was the man standing at the center of the field, wearing a uniform he would never again wear in competition. Lou Gehrig walked slowly toward home plate. His posture was stiff, his movements deliberate. The physical effects of the disease were already visible, though he tried to mask them with dignity. As the crowd rose to its feet, applause thundered through the stadium, rolling like a wave that seemed to last forever. Gehrig stood quietly, removing his cap, overwhelmed by a response he never sought and never expected. He was a man who had spent his entire career letting his actions speak. Now, for the first time, words were required. When Lou Gehrig finally approached the microphone, he hesitated. His voice, when it came, was soft but steady. He spoke without notes, without rehearsal, without theatrics. He did not mention the disease by name. He did not ask for sympathy. Instead, he spoke of gratitude. He thanked his teammates, his managers, the fans, the trainers, the groundskeepers, and above all, his wife Eleanor, whom he called a tower of strength. Then came the sentence that would echo through history. "For the past 2 weeks," he said, "you have been reading about a bad break. Yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." In that moment, Lou Gehrig redefined heroism. Not through victory, not through dominance, but through acceptance. He acknowledged pain without being consumed by it. He faced death without bitterness. He transformed personal tragedy into collective inspiration. Grown men wept openly. Teammates struggled to stand. Even those hardened by decades of competition felt something break inside them. As Gehrig finished speaking, Babe Ruth stepped forward. Their relationship had been complicated in later years, strained by misunderstandings and distance, but in that moment, none of it mattered. Ruth placed his arm around Gehrig's shoulders in a simple, wordless gesture of respect. It was an image that came to symbolize the passing of an era, the union of spectacle and substance, power and perseverance. After that day, Lou Gehrig never played another professional game. The Yankees retired his number, making him the first player in franchise history to receive that honor. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame immediately, bypassing the usual waiting period. Baseball, in its own way, acknowledged that some stories could not wait. The years that followed were quiet and increasingly difficult. ALS progressed relentlessly. Gehrig lost strength in his arms and legs. Simple tasks became impossible. Speech grew labored. Independence slipped away piece by piece. Through it all, Eleanor remained by his side, managing his affairs, shielding him from unwanted attention, and preserving his dignity. Despite his declining health, Gehrig never expressed self-pity. He accepted a position with the New York City Parole Board, determined to remain useful for as long as he could. He continued to attend games when possible, though each visit became more painful, a reminder of a life he could no longer physically inhabit. On June 2, 1941, Lou Gehrig passed away at his home in the Bronx. He was just 37 years old. The news spread quickly and the nation mourned. Flags were lowered. Tributes poured in from across the sports world and beyond. America had lost more than a baseball player. It had lost a symbol. Yet death did not end Lou Gehrig's presence. It transformed it. Over time, ALS itself became known to millions simply as Lou Gehrig's disease. His name, once associated only with home runs and durability, became synonymous with courage in the face of inevitable decline. His story helped bring awareness to a condition that had long gone unnoticed. His legacy extended beyond stadiums and scorecards into hospitals, research labs, and the lives of families facing similar diagnoses. In baseball, his records endured. His consecutive game streak stood untouched for more than half a century, a benchmark of durability so extreme it seemed unreachable. Even when it was eventually surpassed, it was never diminished. The number did not matter as much as what it represented: commitment, reliability, and quiet strength. More importantly, Lou Gehrig's character became the standard by which greatness was measured. He proved that an athlete could be dominant without arrogance, famous without excess, and heroic without spectacle. In an era defined by noise and self-promotion, his silence spoke louder than words. Today, long after the cheers have faded and the stadiums have changed, Lou Gehrig remains. He remains in the stories told by fathers to sons, in the reverence of fans who never saw him play, and in the simple belief that showing up every day still matters. He reminds us that greatness is not only about how long you stand at the peak, but how you face the moment when standing becomes impossible. Lou Gehrig was called the Iron Horse because he never stopped moving forward. In the end, even when his body failed him, his spirit did not. And that is why, decades later, his name still carries weight, not just as a legend of baseball, but as one of the most enduring symbols of courage in American history.